Good evening and welcome to tonight's Common Council meeting for Tuesday, November 10th, 2020. Clerk, call the roll, please.
Nelson.
Here.
Hildebrand.
Here.
Matsdorf.
Here.
Wilson.
Here.
Odeker.
Present.
Hanson.
Present.
Shilsky.
Here.
Gilson. Here.
Let the record show we have a quorum. Next is the pledge. Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you and good evening, everybody. Next on the list, the agenda for this evening is approval of the consent agenda. The chair will entertain a motion.
Move we approve the consent agenda. Second, Hanson.
We have a first and a second. Any discussion? Alder Hildebrand.
The sale of vehicles, are they going on that Wisconsin?
Yes. Yes, they are.
Yes.
Wisconsin surplus.
Any other questions? Hearing none, clerk will call the roll, please.
Hanson.
Yes.
Matsdorf.
Yes.
Shilsky.
Yes.
Wilson.
Yes.
Gilson.
Yes.
Nelson.
Yes.
Odeker.
Yes.
Hildebrand.
Yes.
Motion carried. Thank you. Next on the agenda is the audience comment portion where we ask people to sign up and be recognized by the chair. This is where you do the talking and we do the listening. And tonight we have one person who signed up, and I'm going to mutilate your name, so help me out. Jared?
Jared Delphi.
Perfect. I like the way you say that. Stand up and address the council, please. Thank you. Wherever, is that mic on? No, I don't think so. No, just speak up. That'll do it.
All right. Good evening. My name is Jared Delphi. My wife, Michelle, and I own our primary residence and a small business, both in District 4 and City of Lynn. I've worked in private industry for over 25 years, put together budgets, managed multi-million-dollar projects, hired people, and fired people. I signed the back of the paycheck as well as the front. I understand that budgets come with assumptions, and I understand that the city budget started with the assumption of $100,000 increase based on previous year's precedent. However, 2020 is an unprecedented year. I'm not challenging where the money will be spent, only the amount. Certainly the wastewater treatment plant is going to need a pump. Police department needs a squad car. I'm not challenging the quality of the city services that we offer to taxpayers. I am, however, challenging the budget process, the starting point in particular. This does not appear to be a need-based budget. Obviously, there are needs, but an arbitrary $100,000 increase that you're asking the taxpayers to fund would be a property tax fund. It may be a little less than 1.5%. Maybe that doesn't seem like much. But the funny thing about not much is it goes both ways. Why not hold the budget flat, or you look at spending 99 cents on the dollar? That's not what you do. In conclusion, I'm here to encourage an open and honest dialogue and debate about the starting point of the budget. The wisdom of raising taxes based on a prior year precedent and an unprecedented year. I suspect that most of the people who are asking to fund this don't have the same luxury with their own personal or small business budgets. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming and taking the time to talk to the council. Just as a refresher, when citizens come to the audience portion and make comments, for the record, we don't discuss those things. We rather encourage people to come forward and make those comments and just so you know the process that we go through. But thank you very much for coming. Moving on to item 5, no items were removed from the budget this evening, so that's not needed. Moving on to item 6, committee reports and actions. 6A, Finance and Personnel Committee recommendations from October 27th meeting. Item 6A1, approval of 2020 employee compensation. We have a handout for the summary of employee compensation that I have requested for HR to prepare, and I believe we all have that handout.
It's the one I just gave you.
To continue, that was my request for our HR to figure out what the compensation would be for both full-time and part-time employees. The breakdown that you see on the handout is defines the $1,000 for employees that were hired prior to April 1st of 2020. The $500 are for employees hired after April 1st and have a minimum of 7 months of employment in 2020. And then we have what we refer to as regular part-time employees, and theirs is based on their number of hours on the above criteria. On the bottom of that sheet, the total compensation for all city and utility employees, the city would be $40,760, and the utility employees would be $25,500, for a total of $66,260. The reasoning for this in finance and now coming forward this evening is essential employees, and there's a lot of essential employees that we have in the workplace. And I do think that the city and utility staff, through the direction of Director Austin, have worked from home. They've worked staggering hours. They've worked mornings and afternoons, trying to not be in the same place at the same time with other employees, and that's across the entire board, and still be doing the things that we require them to do as essential employees for the community and get things done. And we have had COVID-19 affect both our departments, and we worked around that. I do feel that this is a way of saying thank you to our employees, and I would encourage the full council to support this as did the Finance Committee. So with that, the chair will call on the Chairman of Finance, Alder Nelson, to make a motion and then ask for a second so we can discuss.
Finance and Personnel Committee is recommended, and I move that we approve of employee compensation as outlined in this memo, including employees hired prior to April 1st, one-time payment of $1,000. Employees hired after April 1st and who have worked at least 7 months will receive $500, and irregular part-time employees who amounts to be prorated based on hours worked. With the compensation totaling $40,760 for city employees and $25,500 for utility employees.
Second, Wilson.
We have a first and a second. Any discussion? Alder Hanson.
Where is this money coming from?
The dollars are coming from each respective unit, whether city or utility, and basically the short answer is our administrator that left May 1st, his entire wages for the year were in the budget that we passed a year ago. He left May 1st, so we have dollars in both departments of the city to move toward this labor additional cost. And it should balance out pretty close to even. I will just add that we did increase compensation for interim director Austin as of May 1st through the end of the year, but that increase is by no means using up the compensation that was not used because we did not have a administrator to this point, and I would make the wild guess that we're not going to have that administrator until the first of the year. So the funds are available without any additional adjustments.
It says about $67,000 approximately.
In round numbers, that's close enough, yeah. Any other questions? Clerk, call the roll, please.
Hildebrand,
Yes.
Nelson,
Yes.
Wilson,
Yes.
Matsdorf,
Yes.
Odeker,
yes,
Gilson, Shilsky,
Yes.
Hanson,
Yes.
Motion carried, thank you. Moving on to item 6A, Roman numeral 2, approve community television 14 requests for funding for 2 new servers and equipment upgrades to the council chambers for a total of $28,100. And I'll ask interim director Austin to give us a brief summary, and then we'll entertain a motion.
Sure. The mayor and Alderman Matsdorf, who's the liaison for Community 14, had approached me following a meeting that they had with Community Television 14. The TV 14 had stressed concerns regarding their existing servers that they have. They have 2 existing servers that they no longer can get parts for. And if those servers break down, they will not be able to provide the service that we need them to hear tonight, as well as the community service that they do provide for fun videotaping the school board meetings and the events that they do around town. So they're proposing, and they talked about it, finance and personnel, to help them pay for the 2 servers in a total of $20,000, as well as some upgrades that they did do the council chambers for a total of $28,100. And then I asked if the mayor, Alderman Matsdorf, would like to add any comments.
Thank you, Director Austin. I think I would add any comments after we make the motion and have a second to it, and then I do have a couple comments to make in regards to this line item. So at this point, I would call on Alder Mattsdorf, our liaison with TV 14, for a motion and ask for a second.
I make a motion to discuss the request of TV 14 for funding for the two servers and for the equipment upgrades already done in the city council chambers.
Second.
In the amount of 28
In the
one.
amount of $20,100.
Thank you. Okay. Any questions? I don't want to jump in and grab the floor, but I will.
Mr. Mayor, if I can just clarify with Alderman Mansdorf, is the motion to approve those requests?
To approve it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. The city, through the user fee collection from the cable service, which I'm gonna do from memory, goes back to like 1998, before my time and probably others in here. And the city has, over time, collected over $100,000 a year for that in round numbers each year. And since the beginning, the city has shared in a agreement to split that 48,000 in round numbers with TV 14, on the understanding that the city didn't want to run TV 14. We're not equipped to do it. The high school is blended with their program and in essence provide the service to the city that we have this evening and they've done throughout over the years. We discovered that there was not an increase in that basic 48,000 going back to 1998. And the equipment, as Director Austin noted, is now 20 years old and there's no more baling wire in the drawer to fix it, so to speak. So they're coming to a point of no return, and they approached Alder Mattsdorf as our liaison to what his thoughts and concerns were on this, and I'll let Alder Mattsdorf comment on that as well. So that's the origin of the history of it, if you will.
Yeah, you pretty much summed it up, but yeah, we've been working on the same budget for since 1998. A lot of this recent upgrades they did out of their own pocket to the council chamber, which is why we really should reimburse them, because that was what they've done for us. And the servers are at the point that if they crash, which could happen really at any time now, they're not coming back. And part of what the mayor put in place when he started was that we're going to be televised, and well, we're going to go against our own rules if we can't be televised. So they asked us if we could do a one-time bill, and we were able to manage some things and came up with the funds for it. So,
And I think that's a good comment, that this is a one-time thing. We're not increasing their budget allocation for 21. It's still at the 50,000, 48,000, whatever number you want to pick. We did discover one thing in this process, that we don't really have any written agreement, and that we will work on in the coming year with our new administrator and get that agreement in writing, just like we have our other agreements that have been handshakes and have been adhered to, but getting it into a more formal process and agreement, that will be done when our new administrator comes on board. So that's something that I guess we didn't realize, we didn't have a written agreement. So it's nice that people understand, and you're held accountable and you fulfill that commitment even without sometimes a contract in place. So, any other questions, comments? Alder Nelson?
Comments, talking about the original kind of 50-50 split on that, and the fact that really the kickback from the cable company hasn't grown. In fact, maybe it's even gone down a little bit because of other ways to get on like cable programming. So that's something that should be looked at, is that, their costs go up every year a little bit too, so it's not fair for them to have just a flat budget every year. So maybe we need to consider city getting less than 50%. Second comment is that, I guess I was kind of surprised that the 8,100 roughly for repairs a year is kind of past bills that have been paid by TV14, but, they accumulated, I guess, slowly up to this 8,000 mark. We really should know beforehand to give to approve compensating instead of coming in after all things have been done and said and paid. So that's something to be very clear. You need to stay on top of, expenditures, major expenditures, and come to us beforehand. It's my understanding there were 2 bids for servers, and one was roughly 20,000 plus tax, and the other one was 21,000 something.
They were pretty much the same once you factored in that you removed the tax off the one. I think you're both right at 20.
So just to note that they comply with the 2 bids for the equipment. I think that's an important thing for everybody to know.
Good comment. Thank you. Alder Wilson?
Maybe I missed it, but the money is coming from,
It would come from the contingency fund. Current balance of that fund is $28,415, so it would pretty much be the remainder of the 2020 contingency funds. Yeah, the big purchase we had earlier this year was when we purchased that property for the storm sewer down on Fairview Drive. That came out of contingency. That's why our balance is low this year.
Alder Hanson?
So these 2 items that are on this page, one is for $66,000, one is for $28,000. That comes up to approximately $94,000 that we're not budgeted for.
Well, no, I would disagree with saying it's not budgeted for, because the 66 is simply moving wages from the administrator payroll to payroll for employees, so that's still within the budget, and that 66 is covered. The 28,100 contingency was budgeted for 100. We have 28,400 in there, so it would come out of 2020 contingency fund, which I think is a good thing, rather than try to sandwich this into the 21 budget that it would not be budgeted for, and we'd already would be affecting the contingency carry forward. So from that standpoint, again, getting it over with this year as part of the 2020 expense, and it's over and done with.
I'm definitely in favor of both of these items. My point is, if we kept the six, and I'm glad we're not, I'm glad we're sending employees, but if we kept the $66,000, we'd have more contingency fund.
No, that's incorrect.
I know that.
because the 66 is in wages, it's not in contingency.
So that money wasn't spent where to be next year.
Well, any surplus
Goes
gets
into the
rolled
general
into the
fund.
general fund.
I'm just, thinking about the $100,000 in our budget for next year, and this particular amount, we have unexpected things. I guess I'm just trying to ask questions about that aspect of how things take place, so.
Any other questions? Clerk will call the roll, please.
Gilson,
Yes.
Nelson,
Yes.
O'Decker,
yes,
Hildebrand,
Yes.
Hanson,
Yes.
Mansdorf,
Yes.
Shilsky,
Yes.
Wilson.
Yes.
Motion carried, thank you. Moving on to new business, 7A, approve Faith Technologies proposal for VSA upgrades at the Plymouth Utilities Building for $39,580. I'll ask Interim Director Austin for a summary, please.
Sure. The heating and cooling system at the utility building, even though only 8 years old, the controls, just like any other technology, right, that's all computer-based and technology-based, is outdated, and it's experiencing a lot of controls that no longer function, which are not, some office spaces are not getting any heating or cooling in them, and they continue to add to them. So at first it was only 1 or 2 offices, and now it's 3 or 4 offices. We did have Ahern come and do a mechanical check to make sure it wasn't mechanical, and then they made any modifications they needed to on the mechanical side of things, and yet there are still 4 offices that do not have heating or cooling in them. The control software has to be run on a Windows 7 computer because there is no other, you can't get any more support for the software system that we have to control the controllers. It is a proprietary product, so only certain vendors can work on the product. It's not an open source. So Ahern cannot do any of our controls for us because it is a proprietary product. If we wanted to go to an open source control system, you'd be probably looking at over $150,000 in upgrades. So to continue with the proprietary product and to have Faith Technologies come in to get us to an upgraded system, even though it would still be proprietary, you're looking at $39,580. And without that, these offices will not get heating or cooling.
Thank you. The chair will entertain a motion so we can discuss.
I move we approve the Faith Technologies proposal for the VSA upgrades for the utilities building for cost of $39,580.
Second.
We have a first and a second. Any discussion? Alder Hanson.
Where's the amount coming from?
So we do allocate building funds every year at the utility building, and there's enough funds to cover this particular project this year.
Out of 2020?
Yep. Yeah, we haven't had many things at the utility building.
Okay.
Any other questions? I would, maybe as a FYI, for some of our newer council members, I asked our city clerk, Sabrina Dittman, to go back and dig up some old information. And the city receives what we call a pilot program, payment in lieu of taxes. And that is based on the asset value of the utilities. Back in 2012, that number, to round it off, was 400,000. After we built the new utility campus, in 13 up through the current date, and it increases about 20 or 30,000 every year. That number moved from 400 now up to 760 or 770, something like that. So we as a city receive a pilot payment from the utilities like ordinary taxpayers do. It's just that we don't call it tax. It's state defined as a pilot payment. And so the city is a beneficiary of the campus upgrade that was done back in 2012. So it's a payment that goes on forever, and that was one of the incentives for doing the campus day one. And if that increase, incremental, goes on for 20 or 30 years, it pays for itself in no time. So that's just an explanation of what the pilot does, how it flows through from the utilities to us. And I think it's in our best interest to keep the utility running properly. And by the way, that 39,000 will get added to the asset value, so we'll get a couple nickels off of that one too. But we get to pay ourselves back for good management, if I can use that word. Not that we want to, but unfortunately, things break. So, any other comments? Clerk will call the roll, please, on the motion for the $39,580, which comes out of the 2020 budget.
Wilson,
Yes.
Shilsky,
Yes.
Nassar, Hanson,
Yes.
Hildebrand, Gilson,
Yes.
Nelson,
Yes.
Odeker,
yes,
Motion carried, thank you. And item number 8, public hearing followed by council discussion and action. I hereby declare a public hearing open on resolution number 15 of 2020 for the adoption of the annual budget. The budget is printed and a copy for you that was in the paper. This is an annual resolution that the city approves of the expenditure funds, the enterprise funds for the utility, the capital project funds, the debt service fund, the risk management fund. It approves the tax levy as outlined and the utility rates, and it becomes effective upon approval. The chair will entertain a motion so that we can discuss, and I'm sure Director Austin would love to spend a long, extensive time explaining any answers this evening. We did have this previously, but this is a requirement for the public hearing, and the chair will open it up for any questions from the public at this time. Mr. Nelson.
Nobody from the public's going to speak. You know, I think, Jared, your comment probably has some merit. We shouldn't just automatically say we're going to start out with an extra 100,000. I don't know how much property values have increased in the city of Plymouth this year. My guess is, from being involved in real estate, it's probably about 4 to 5% increase in value. So, do we know what effect on mill rate this budget would have?
So I do not have that answer tonight, as the DOR, the Department of Revenue, has not given us the manufacturing assessed value at this time. There is one property that is that filed an appeal with the state because the state does the manufacturing assessment. And so they're hoping to close and settle with that one property before giving our final investment. If I look at the manufacturing value of last year and then include that with the rest of the assessment for the city, we would increase 20 cents per thousand. So last year they were 6.95 per thousand, and we go up to 7.15. But I can't give you the exact increase that it would affect as we don't have the final assessments from the state. Regardless, they're going to be they're not computing this week. They will be computing next week, and by the end of next week, we will have the final assessed value for the city of Plymouth. And then it would be a separate resolution on the next common council agenda approving the tax rate.
As a point of clarification, because we don't have the state number, that is going to be an adjustment to what we passed this evening, only for that calculation that's a pass-through from the state. And for some of the older alders, we've had that in the past when we haven't had the state information. And that's the one missing piece, which happened to be the largest piece from the state at this point. So there will be a follow-up in order to make that technical adjustment based on the DOR evaluation that comes through.
But I do think, in coming years, we shouldn't just automatically say 100,000, maybe it's 50,000 next year. Quite frankly, anywhere in the budget, I thought the departments were all reasonable and their requests, pretty much over the last 6 years I've been involved in the committee, their budgets have been pretty flat. Understandably, we have some compensation, personnel compensation increases. Other than that, most of the departments have been pretty frugal and done a good job of getting work done too. We actually did probably some reduction in staff numbers over those years. At least some of the higher paid ones I know we got. And through some of the creative financing we've had in the past few years, we've saved a lot, hundreds of thousands of dollars every year in doing so. Getting our debt down is going to help us in the long run too. So, done a good job of managing the debt.
Thank you, Alder Nelson. Any other comments? I declare the public hearing closed. At this point, the chair will entertain a motion to adopt Resolution 15 of 2020 as presented on the annual budget for the city of Plymouth.
So move all the council to adopt the resolution in 15.
Second, Wilson.
We have a first and a second. Any discussion? Clerk will call the roll on the adoption of the annual budget, please.
Gilson,
Yes.
Nelson,
Yes.
Odekirk,
yes,
Hildebrand,
Yes.
Hanson,
Yes.
Matsdorf,
Yes.
Shilsky,
Yes.
Wilson.
Yes.
Motion carried. Thank you. Before asking for a motion to adjourn, I want to draw attention to the fact that the November 24th meeting is being moved to 8 o'clock. So the motion to adjourn is to 8 o'clock on November 24th, 2020.
So move, Hanson. Adjourn.
Second, Wilson.
We have a first and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Stand adjourned. Thank you.